Hello, welcome to another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. I'm Lady TrenettWilson, your lecturer and social historian. We're celebrating Black History Month, and I have been wanting to bring this lady to you for quite a while, and I thought, okay, today would be a great time for that lecture. So thank you for joining me. Hello, subbies, and welcome to all of my new subscribers. And if you've never subscribed, but you love Royal Black and Elite, I hope that you consider subscribing. And today's lecture is going to be about a singer, dancer, and actress. Her name is Diahann Carroll, and I just can't wait to get into her story. Now, she was actually born Carol Diane Johnson on July the 17th, 1935. And she's won Tony Awards and Golden Globes, and she's been nominated for the Emmy 5 times. Now, Diane really got her start back in the 50s because she was born in 1935. So she was a young girl when she actually got into the entertainment industry. She appeared in the black early blockbusters like Carmen Jones in 1954, Porgy and Bess in 1959, and Claudine in 1979. She's perhaps known best, however, for her long show that she was on called Julia, where she played a single mother who was a nurse from 1968 to 1971. I remember her the most, however, on the show called Dynasty, when she played the incomparable Dominique Devereaux, who had an attitude and would get right with those women on the show. So we really loved her in those shows. Now, she was born in the Bronx. Her father's name is John Johnson, and he worked as a subway conductor. And her mother, she was a nurse. Her name was Mabel. So we kind of see where she gets the idea from of a nurse being a show. Now, while still an infant, they moved from the Bronx to Harlem. So that's where she grew up, and that's where she really started getting her feet wet in the music and the arts industry. She actually went to a music and art school where one of her classmates was the and one and only Billy D. Williams. The time she was 15, she was modeling. One of her contracts was with Ebony magazine. Now, Ebony was one of the largest, well, really was the first black magazine that was distributed on a national level. And their story is going to come back up again later on in Diane's life, but she was modeling for them. Now, she really got her start when she entered a contest. You see, at 18, she dropped out after she graduated high school. She went on to the University of New York, but that's not what she wanted to do. So she dropped out when she was 18 to really begin her career. And the way she began it is she entered a contest and she actually won $1,000. And that opened the door. Many, many invitations came after them and opportunities came her way after that. Now, her first film debut was in Carmen Jones in 1954. That movie actually starred Dorothy Dandridge, who was a great actress during that time period. And she worked steadily, starring alongside people like Sidney Poitier, Paul Newman, and Joanne Woodward. Now, Sidney Poitier was a big part of her life, and she stayed in a relationship with him for a very long time. We'll talk more about him when we get into her many marriages. Now, she became the first Black woman to win an Oscar in 1962 in her role as Barbara Woodruff in a play called No Strings. In 1974, she was nominated for an Academy Award when she played opposite of James Earl Jones in Claudine. Her role as Julia, we talked a little bit earlier, was the first black series for a woman where she played a nurse and a single mom. And so you can just imagine how accomplished this woman was in her career. But even though she was accomplished in her career, her personal life was not so successful. Like women of that time, Diahann Carroll didn't stay married to one man long. She doesn't beat, of course, Elizabeth Taylor, who I think had like 8 marriages, but she did have half of that. She was married 4 times. Her first husband, Monty Kay, they were married in 1956. Her father was so upset about it, he boycotted the wedding, and so he didn't even go. They were divorced by 1962. They had a daughter, however, and her name was Suzanne Kay, and she became a journalist and a writer. Now, the most messiest of her lovers and marriages was the 9-year entanglement she had with married Sidney Poitier. Now, it was a hot mess. She loved him, and look how handsome he was, but he was a married man. Oh, by the way, she was married to Monty as well. So that was a mess, and she divorced Monty because Sidney had convinced her he loved her and they were going to be together. So she divorced her husband to be with him, and then he didn't divorce his wife. Can you believe that? So she was basically just kind of waiting on a little string for him. And so he finally divorced his wife. And he wanted to do like a little, arrangement with Diahann before they actually got married to live together. Now, they've been dating 9 years, but now they have to live together. And not only that, she had a daughter. He told her he wanted to live with her by herself without the daughter, just to test it and see how it would work. And then they could bring the daughter in. I'm glad to say Diahann was tired of his mess and she said no. So they broke up at that time. As I teach this lecture, I cannot escape how beautiful Diahann Carroll was. And so she really had her pick of the litter when it came to men. So she was married again in no time. Now, she didn't marry Sidney, so this is her second marriage. His name was David Frost, and he was a British television host. They married in 1970. But it didn't last too long. They got a divorce, unfortunately, in only 3 years. She then married again. Again, like I said, she wasn't scared to get married the same year she got divorced to a man named Fred Glussman. And they were married in Las Vegas. He owned a boutique there. They were only married for 4 months. And it is reported, allegedly, he was abusive. So that's the reason they divorced so quickly. Now, 2 years later, she was trying love again. So she married Robert De Leon, and he was the editor of Jet magazine. Now, Ebony and Jet were a company that was owned by the Johnson Publishing Company, and those were their two magazines. I was talking about mentioning it a little earlier. They were married in 1975. Now, listen, she was a cougar by that time. Diahann was 40 and her new husband was 24. Now, unfortunately, it seemed like they were, trying to be together for a while because they were married in 75. But unfortunately, in 1977, he was unalived during a crash in Beverly Hills. Now, her fourth and final marriage was to Vic Damon, whom she married in 1987. But unfortunately, they were divorced in 1996. So the man that I mentioned, just the one David Frost, they really wasn't. They were kind of got their marriage annulled because they were only married for 4 months. Only 1 year later, however, in 1997, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She underwent radiation and she lived another glorious 17 years before passing at the age of 84 on October the 4th, 2019, in West Hollywood. Now, her IMB is way too long to count. I mean, it's just, she has been in more movies than I could ever mention here. But some that you may have also heard of were Sister Sister, which was a show, Mo Better Blues, which was a movie, The Five Heartbeats as well. And she appeared in her last role, and she was 81, and it was in 2016 in something called The Masked Saint. So, what an interesting story. What a lovely woman, a beautiful woman. And, sometimes you get into a relationship. I'm sure the pressure was great on her as an actress and being in a relationship with a married man, and she was married. It ended as often those type of relationships do. Not well. And they weren't together in the end. But she was a lovely, again, woman, gracious. And if you can remember her in any of these shows, I have always loved her sassiness, her beauty, and elegance. So I hope you learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture about Miss Diahann Carroll. Many of our actresses are lost through time because, you don't see Julia anymore or Porgy and Bess. But I am so honored to be able to bring her to you tonight so that her story is not lost in history. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on another great episode of Royal, Black, and Elite. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment. Have you ever seen any of her movies? Thanks for watching.